Over the past 6 months, Congress members and federal politicians have orchestrated an artificial problem they are now pretending to solve.
Passing this budget agreement was critical. That's why I'm speaking to you tonight, to report on the crisis averted.
After 6 months of meetings and talks later, they have produced nothing of substance and are now pretending to be the saviors of the U.S. economy.
If we had failed to reach an agreement on the budget, there were extreme voices threatening to take America for the first time in our 247-year history into default on our national debt.
This video will go over the entirety of these 6 months and the lying and backtracking these politicians have done along the way. All of this starts 6 months ago on January 19, 2023. The United States reached its debt ceiling of $31.4 trillion. For context, the debt ceiling is a limit to the amount of money the Treasury can borrow to do things Congress mandates by law to happen. The Treasury therefore started to do what it called extraordinary measures and warned that it did not know when it would default on its debts, which is when it would run out of money. 12 days ago, Speaker McCarthy was voted into the position of Speaker on January 7th, along with a new Republican majority in the House of Representatives. Speaker McCarthy therefore promised cuts to federal spending, as this policy agenda had just installed him as the Speaker of the House. During this time, Biden refused to compromise or even talk with McCarthy, taking the stance throughout these entire 6 months of it being my way or the highway.
Happy to meet with McCarthy, but not on whether or not the debt limit gets extended. That's not negotiable.
Biden demanded a clean debt ceiling increase and believed that spending cuts could be talked about later on. This would be his position for 5 months until May, when he was forced to compromise. Kevin McCarthy, on the other hand, demanded a cut to discretionary spending by reducing federal spending to 2022 levels. Biden therefore promised to veto any bill which reduced federal spending by pretending that Medicare and Social Security were being threatened by Republicans through spending cuts.
If they try to cut Medicare, I'll stop them. I got a veto pen.
Biden did not like what Kevin McCarthy wanted to do, as this would directly undermine previous bills and policies he signed into law, like the Inflation Reduction Act and other of his bloated spending bills. On February 1st, Biden and McCarthy had their first meeting on the debt ceiling, and it looked like compromise would not happen. The Treasury therefore estimated that a default would happen this summer. At this time, and going on for the next 6 months, an unfair framing of this issue developed. House Republicans were unfairly represented as holding the economy hostage for not allowing a clean debt ceiling increase. This is an unfair framing of the situation because previous negotiations from both parties over the debt ceiling did demand deficit reduction legislation in the past. From February to March, no progress occurred. Biden ignored calls from McCarthy to act on this issue.
I am more concerned than I have ever been to be able to get this debt ceiling done because he refuses to meet with anybody and then misleads the American public, and the markets aren't seeing that.
On the other hand, the public and media at this time posed insane and impossible proposals to solve that ceiling crisis. The conversation around the Treasury minting $1 trillion coin and depositing it into the Federal Reserve came back, which funnily enough came from a random lawyer with no financial background shitposting about possible alternative solutions on a blogging site. The most insane and unconstitutional suggestion proposed at this time is the idea that Biden could invoke the 14th Amendment and abolish the debt ceiling. The argument stems from the clause of the 14th Amendment, which states, "The validity of the public debt of the United States shall not be questioned." In reality, only the legislative branch has the power of the purse and can control government spending. After weeks of inaction and Biden refusing to compromise, Speaker Kevin McCarthy decided to pass his own debt ceiling bill on April 26, 2023, stating, "We've done our job." It is important to note that this bill would increase the debt ceiling by $1.5 trillion only, as the final compromise would be very different to this. Joe Biden at this time refused to do compromise. Even Senate Democrats were alarmed by his inaction and refusal to compromise. Biden, of course, rejected McCarthy's debt limit plan, and his rejection signaled weakness from Biden, as he had now backtracked on his initial demand of Republicans to propose a budget to start the conversation. On April 24, 2023, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen put forward the idea of an X date, which would be the day the government would default. During April, little was known about the specific date this would happen, except that it would happen in the summer. A week later, Janet Yellen presented when she believed this date would happen, June 1st, 2023, and demanded action before this date. Janet Yellen fearmongered the conversation around this date, and Republicans were unfairly characterized as being crazy for stating the actual date would be weeks later. Janet Yellen would later shift X date to June 5th, which shows that she was fearmongering and lying over when the debt default would actually happen. Meanwhile, during the first 2 weeks of May, Biden pretended that nothing was happening. The most he would give McCarthy was a simple phone call over the debt ceiling. Biden finally decided to talk with McCarthy. Biden and McCarthy were unable to reach a compromise, but promised to strike a deal by next Monday. On May 27, McCarthy and Joe Biden agreed on a debt ceiling on principle, and the voting of the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023 was planned. The debt ceiling bill passed the House 314 to 117 on May 31st. This does not mean that fighting did not happen over the bill. You see, the bill would suspend the debt ceiling until 2025, meaning that there would be effectively no limit to how much the Treasury could borrow until 2025. This is completely opposite to how the conversation initially started, meaning that Kevin McCarthy had completely lost ground to Biden. Additionally, Kevin McCarthy was attacked over the fact that the deal would not actually cut back on spending like he promised, or anything like what he initially proposed. Kevin McCarthy had essentially given Biden a clean debt limit increase and an infinite debt limit. McCarthy attempted to frame this deal as a Republican win, but unfortunately for him, it appeared more Democrats than Republicans supported it. 165 Democrats supported the passing of the bill compared to 149 Republicans, which does not really seem like a Republican win. Kevin McCarthy was therefore humiliated and laughed at for settling at this deal. It appears Joe Biden has won this fight, as the debt ceiling will now be suspended until the next president takes office, early January 2025. The debt ceiling crisis has been successfully averted. Well, with this compromise, several liars, insincere politicians have been exposed. Thomas Massie and MTG, who opposed the debt ceiling increase without spending cuts, caved into voting this bill, and both have been exposed for lying about the details of the bill on Twitter. Funnily enough, Thomas Massie was the one who started the trend of wearing a pin with the national debt.
So I built it from scratch. The most obvious thing is it's roof flashing. This is copper roof flashing that I had to bend up to make the case. Inside of it is a battery and a small computer that logs onto the internet, goes to the Treasury's website and gets the actual debt that they publish every day. And then through the course of the day, when the Treasury is not publishing the debt, this makes an approximation of what the debt is based on the historical average.
And now appears to congratulate and celebrate suspension of the debt ceiling. Kevin McCarthy additionally chickened out of his demands to decrease federal spending and is now celebrating the fact on Twitter that 0.2% of the IRS's budget was cut in this bill. On the other hand, Janet Yellen has now been exposed as a liar, for she lied about the date when the United States will default and has been constantly blaming the other sectors of government as being at fault. Moving on to President Joe Biden, throughout these entire 6 months, she blamed MAGA Republicans for being the cause of this possible default and lied about about the effects the spending cuts would have. In reality, Joe Biden refused to compromise or find common ground for 5 of these 6 months. He first stated that Congress has not presented a proposal, and when Speaker Kevin McCarthy passed his proposal, he blamed MAGA extremism as the cause of a possible default and falsely claimed Republicans were trying to gut federal programs. All of this is, of course, false. Republicans only proposed cuts to discretionary spending and did not plan to cut VA spending. Republicans firmly opposed cuts to the military, which in reality Joe Biden proposed. Looking forward into the future, America faces a debt nightmare that no one is attempting to solve. Just servicing the national debt costs around $663 billion in 2023. It seems no one actually cares about the elephant in the room, the fact that federal spending has gotten out of control.
To the latest information now, new video of Colorado Congresswoman Lauren Boebert appears to contradict her claims that she missed a vote on the debt ceiling deal intentionally. Boebert said she skipped the vote in protest of the bill, which she called, quote, DC self-created garbage in a tweet. The video from a CNN reporter shows Boebert running up the steps of the Capitol.
They just closed it. They closed it? Yeah.
Well, CBS News Colorado has reached out to Congresswoman Boebert's office for clarification, but we have not heard back yet.